What's up, Notre Dame fans? This is Tyler Horka along with Patrick Engel. We are at Notre Dame Stadium where the Fighting Irish just improved to 4-3 with a 44-21 victory over the UNLV Rebels. 44-21 sounds pretty good. You win by 23 points and the spread was somewhere around 25-26. So you think it's a good game for Notre Dame, but when you really dive into the numbers and if you watched this game especially, there were still some of those telltale signs of maybe this is not a great Notre Dame football team. Patrick, I know that's really overarching and broad, but what are some of the specifics that you want to dive into when you look at that final score and you look more specifically at the way Notre Dame played today?
Yeah, I think maybe the best way to sum this one up, and I asked the folks on Twitter for 4 words to describe the game after every game. I think I'd go with better than the alternative, which we know it could be worse because Notre Dame has lost a version of this game against a team they're a heavy favorite over at home twice, and they didn't do that today. So better than the alternative, really. But when you dive into it, like you said, pretty uneven, or if you want to call it uninspiring. I don't think that's unfair at all. And really, it was kind of one of those where obviously you looked at this as a potentially get-right game, even though, yes, this kind of situation had been a spot where Notre Dame had stumbled twice before. And I don't know that it quite cured that when you look at a lot of the individual areas, even though it's, yes, this was their most comfortable win of the season in terms of margin. And all right, you're not exactly in a position to turn away wins right now if you're Notre Dame sitting at 3-3 just trying to get to a bowl game. But yeah, I think maybe let's start with this one. Drew Pyne, the second game in a row where he was at 50% passing or worse.
Exactly,
and
50%.
Yeah, he ended up at 14 of 28 and aided a little bit. I believe his last 2 throws, or 2 of the last 3, I can't remember off the top of my head, were the little catch shovel like that. Counts as a pass, but it's, for all intents and purposes, that's a run play. I believe he completed 4 of those. So you're looking at way below 50% if you take those out when you think of actually drop back to throw. So,
and 6 of those, again, went to Michael Mayer.
Right. And another game where, you're not getting a whole lot from the receivers, but I think that's pretty well established at this point. But really, we've seen Notre Dame not need to rely on its receivers a ton when Drew Pyne has been on and been better than what he was today. And ultimately, Notre Dame needs to find a way to get him back to that point. And there were, again, you saw it for the second straight game, throws out there that were ones that he either needs to make more often, let's say the shot in the end zone there for Lenzy, or ones that really need to be a completion every time. That touchdown to a wide open Chris Tyree on the scene there where no one really ran with him. But got to be a better game for Drew Pyne going forward, especially next week against Syracuse, where close against Clemson, Syracuse was today, but a pretty tough defense that can make life hard for a lot of quarterbacks and has this year where some way, somehow, Notre Dame needs to find a way to get Drew Pyne closer to that version of him that he was against North Carolina and BYU.
Yeah, that's a really good Syracuse team that Notre Dame has to go play this upcoming weekend. And based on the way Notre Dame played today, I wouldn't feel too great about it. And like you said, based on the way Syracuse played against Clemson, they really controlled that game until Kate Klubnik went into the game for Clemson and kind of turned things around there. So that'll be an interesting one. But just from today's perspective, yeah, Drew Pyne was not good. And that's the second game that Drew Pyne has not been good. And Marcus Freeman talked about it in the postgame. A quarterback, especially a backup quarterback, and he was a backup quarterback going into the season and for all intents and purposes still is. If Tyler Buchner was healthy, he'd probably still be starting. A guy like that is going to go through ups and downs throughout the course of the season and definitely throughout the course of a game. And you've seen it the last couple of games. He's had some good plays in these last couple of games, but overall his play is not where you would want it to be. And the Notre Dame wide receivers are suffering from that. That's already a group that didn't have a lot going on when Drew Pyne was operating at his best, and now he has not been anything close to that, and the Notre Dame wide receiver game is pretty much non-existent. Michael Mayer, it was another one of those games where he's targeted 12 times, I think it was, makes 6 catches, is that right? He was great. He was really good, and for me, the Notre Dame offense was Michael Mayer and Logan Diggs, who has his first career 100-yard game. He ended up with 130 yards, I think it was.
On 28 carries.
28 carries, so efficient running. They really leaned on him down the stretch because UNLV made this a 2-score game a couple of times. I think it was 30-14, and then maybe it was 37-21. So they're within 2 touchdowns, 2 two-point conversions a couple of times. Marcus Freeman and company said, hey, we're going to lean on Logan Diggs because Audric Estime had another fumble. That's 3 fumbles lost in the last 4 games, I think it is. So that's a little bit of a concern. We didn't see him carry the ball. After that, they really leaned on Logan Diggs, and it was another game where Chris Tyree wasn't really a factor, especially in the running game. So the signs that you like, Logan Diggs looks like a dude. Michael Mayer is definitely a dude, probably the best tight end in college football. But then defensively, you're going up against a UNLV team that was missing starting quarterback Doug Brumfield, was missing starting running back Aiden Robbins. Those are their 2 best offensive players. And you still saw UNLV move the ball a little bit. I think there was a 47-yard rush. There was a 74-yard rush that set up UNLV's first touchdown. DJ Brown did not look good trying to make an open field tackle on that play. So, Patrick, when you look at this defense, they forced 3 and outs on 7 of UNLV's first 8 possessions. I think that was a little more of UNLV just not having the personnel to sustain good drives. But then they're susceptible to those big plays. So how do you kind of juxtapose those 2 things or look at those 2 things in relation to each other? Because it was another one of those games where you said, well, if they just put it all together, they would have had a good game, but they didn't put it all together, and UNLV ends up scoring 21 points because of that.
Yeah, it's kind of the theme of I think this game has been a little bit of what you've seen, the theme of the season for Notre Dame's defense, which is, on the whole, this is a good defense that does a lot of things well, but in the areas where you really can have an impact or can really swing the game on defense, it just doesn't deliver as much as you would want it to. And that was obviously showed up a lot in the first half of the season with the takeaways or lack thereof, and finally got a fumble they forced.
Yes.
That they recovered.
Shout out Clarence Lewis.
Yeah, exactly. Clarence turning what was a big play for UNLV into a big play for Notre Dame. But yeah, Notre Dame had not recovered a fumble it had forced all year. The one you remember from North Carolina there, that was not credited as a forced fumble. It was just a drop. But and then you kind of see that same thing and of just not delivering the impactful plays often enough in the red zone, where Notre Dame allowed UNLV to score touchdowns on all 3 of its red zone trips. And by percentage, Notre Dame's defense is one of the worst in the country at red zone touchdown rate allowed. It's the only one actually coming into today that was worse was Rutgers, and that's not company you want to. No. You don't want to be company with Rutgers in anything.
No.
So I think that's one of those things that really would be getting a lot more attention if it was on offense. Like if you're that bad at red zone touchdown rate on offense, and don't get me wrong, Notre Dame has not been a good red zone.
Look at all the field goals
team.
today.
Yeah, exactly. All the field goals and the miss, the turnover rundowns there, and then the interception. But that's been one of those things that I think back to the first day of fall camp where everything Notre Dame did was red zone, and a lot of that was from like Al Golden's emphasis being like that's one of the things he picked up in the NFL, how much time they spent in red zone prep and red zone work. And for all of that, really on both sides, but I think we'll stick with defense here, especially given how low that touchdown rate allowed was. It just hasn't really shown up in the way you would have wanted it to, where that's a place where that's where you want to get more turnovers, that's where you want to get more sacks, TFLs, havoc plays, more, we talked about this before, plays on the ball, pass breakups, and you just don't really see a lot of the tackling. There's been times in the red zone or times on 3rd down there where the tackling it's just kind of scattershot. We saw that on that Harrison Bailey play where he had, I think it was at least 3, maybe 4 Notre Dame defenders had a chance to bring him down for a sack. He ends up being able to scramble and get the first down and then scrambles in for a touchdown a couple of plays later. So, I think defensively it's just like, it's not bend but don't break, because the UNLV had those 2 big runs there, but it's not the easiest defense to bend.
Yeah.
But
it breaks sometimes.
You can break it once you get down there, or if you start with that short field position. And that I don't know that that's necessarily. I think you'd rather be bend but don't break, honestly.
I think you would. Break, don't bend. They're the antithesis of bend, don't break. It's just been weird, but we'd be remiss not to mention that Isaiah Foskey had 3 sacks today. He's 3 sacks away from tying Justin Tuck for the all-time Notre Dame career record, which is 24.5 sacks. He also blocked 2 punts today. I mean, that's a ridiculous game. A combination of 5 sacks and blocked punts. I don't think you see that very often. He's just a difference maker, and you would have liked Notre Dame to have done more with the blocked punts. Maybe it was 10 points off of those. I think they might have scored a touchdown and maybe settled for a field goal, because both times it set up Notre Dame in prime with prime field position. And that was another big theme of today. And I guess we'll just wrap it up kind of where we started. That's another one of those things where you look at the score and you're like, Notre Dame dominated this thing, but it was really won with plays like that. It was won with field position, where every time you looked up in the first half, Notre Dame was starting a drive on the plus side of the 50, and credit to Blake Grupe for making some kicks. He even missed a field goal. What did he go, 3 for 4 today?
Right.
So Notre Dame was just down there a lot, and it was like kind of like with the BYU game and maybe even some other games this year, where had Notre Dame just capitalized a couple more times, maybe we're talking about something in the mid-50s points-wise, and Notre Dame gets that win where you come away saying, that's what it looks like. That's what a good team looks like. Marcus Freeman keeps saying, we have a good football team. We have a good football team. I think this team is capable of making good football plays here and there, especially defensively at times. Offensively, even, you press the Michael Mayer button and you have some good play potential there too. But in just terms of putting it all together, I haven't really seen it. And that doesn't bode well considering 2 of the next 3 games. You're playing Syracuse and you're playing Clemson. If you watched that game today, which I'm sure many of you did, that's a couple of really good football teams.
Yeah, this was kind of the first game to put a bow on your special teams point, where like field position really seemed to tilt the game in favor of Notre Dame. And I figured at some point that might be the case, and even if it was against maybe in a game like this against an inferior opponent. But because we heard Brian Mason talk ever since he was named special teams coordinator here, of like, we want to affect the punter, we want to create bad kicks, we want to pressure him, and you saw that today with and right after the block punt, punter might have been kind of hearing the footsteps. It wasn't a good kick that Brandon Joseph was able to return and get for the third straight time there, third out of fourth. I can't remember exactly which, starting field position for Notre Dame on the plus side. And we're talking about probably a mid-50s or so score if Notre Dame even punches in 2/3 of its red zone possessions for touchdowns, or gets just more points period, or get points on all but one drive that it starts there in plus territory, or drive that crosses the opponent 40. So one of those where overall looks good, but man, it's like feels like a lot more stuff left out there for Notre Dame.
Yeah, and like we said, a tough one for Notre Dame coming up. Patrick Engel will be in Syracuse, New York for that one, and we'll have you covered throughout the week at blueandgold.com. But until then, I'm Tyler Horka, that's Patrick Engel, and we'll see you next time.